Greetings to our Toward Inclusive Excellence community. In our third semester podcast, fall semester podcast is what I meant to say. We are joined by Dr. Adriene Lim, Dean of the Libraries and Professor of Practice in the College of Information Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Lim's career path is so incredible, and I'm excited to speak with you today about your role and how you've been able to navigate the leadership labyrinth as a BIPOC lesbian person. Dr. Lim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It's a treat to have this conversation with you. And so please share with our Thai audience what motivated you to pursue academic library leadership roles and why?
Well, that is a very interesting question. I'm one of those types of people that always just acknowledge the luck, the opportunity that was there beyond anything that I planned for my life. And then each little step of the way, smaller decisions led to what became, little did I know it then, but a lifelong passion for academic librarianship. But it started mostly just as a young kid who loved public libraries. So I was attracted to libraries in the beginning. I'm a native of Detroit, grew up in a really, what was essentially a very poor working class neighborhood. And we had this little out branch of the Detroit Public Library in that neighborhood. And I used to go to it almost every day. And it was like my little haven. And later, because nobody else in my family had gone to college, and in those days, most people in my neighborhood, we were not expected to go to college just generally. We thought we were brought up to almost expect factory work. Of course, the automobile industry in Detroit, changed dramatically, as you know.
Right.
And then, some of us didn't have quite a good future to look forward to. So for me, I went back to college, into community college when I was in my late 20s. And I was the first one, as I said, in my family. And so by the time I went from community college to regular university, Wayne State University, I walked through some of the aisles and I literally started sobbing because one of the areas that I walked through were the HQs, Library of Congress,
Yes.
But because I'm feminist, lesbian, I have a lot of class consciousness from being an activist in my day, but I had never actually been in a library that had that many books that were calling out to me, all those voices, all those minds. That's how I thought of it. And it made me sob. So after I got my library degree, I thought either public libraries or academic libraries, both of those attracted me just because I love libraries. But then academia started being more compelling because I thought it was really a way to help people transform their lives even more so than perhaps public libraries, although I love them. So that's how I ended up in it. I just love it and continue to think we have a unique mission in the world. Our values are unique. I am mindful, though, of vocational awe these days.
Yes.
A wonderful article, and I can't remember her name.
Fubazi,
yes. But I love that article. There were many things that I thought resonated with me. But on the other side of that article, definitely I still believe that we do things in the world that not many others do. Intellectual freedom, privacy, etc. We know. So that's what attracted me.
Thank you for sharing that. And I absolutely agree with you. It's interesting. I think at another time, we should definitely have a conversation around the public library to academic library kind of trajectory, because it seems to be such a consistent thread of how many BIPOC leaders have come into the academic library space. It was some touch point that took place, or a series of touch points that took place in the public library space that led us to say, yeah, we could see ourselves doing this work. And could you talk a little bit about your professional trajectory? So kind of from first job to position here, How did that look for you?
Well, one of my first jobs was working in the community college library, Schoolcraft College, and I was a library technician. I remember they were requiring a bachelor's degree to get that position. And so, as I told you, I'm an older student, no one, first one. By the time I got my bachelor's degree, I literally was jumping up for joy at having to leave corporate America. I had made my way without any degrees, not even a high school degree. I had a GED for reasons I won't go into, but I felt I had reached my ceiling by then at the age of, late 20s.
Right.
So when I got my first job as a library technician, that was just like a dream come true, And so I worked with her name, I believe, if I remember correctly, Denise Nesbitt. She was a librarian of color who worked at Schoolcraft College. She was the first librarian of color, a Black woman, who I had ever seen in that role, or any woman of color in that role at that time. And I was looking at how well she did her job. She was a great leader. And I thought, maybe I could do that. So I enrolled in Wayne State's library school. So from that job, then Wayne State hired me, and I went into IT and systems work after being a cataloger. Back then, IT was transforming almost everything.
Everything. Yes.
We're talking
and at a quick clip. Yes.
Quick clip. Wow, that's hard to say.
It is.
But what was wonderful, so I had always been computer kind of savvy, even though at that time, not many people were. So I had that going for me, I guess. And then not a shyness about, so just to share, I realized that other people who didn't know the answer about IT, they would say things like, I'll get back to you in a minute. And then they'd go and look it up and read the manuals. And I said, hey, I can do that too. I can learn. So I did learn some programming. I knew how to do some systems administration, et cetera, et cetera. So I used that to go into more IT and systems. And from there, started working for the Detroit Area Library Network. And I became a consortial librarian. And we migrated 30 some odd organizations from their first generation systems into next generation integrated library systems, et cetera, et cetera. But later, when I became an associate dean and then moved up the ranks, finally to go into deanships, I've been a dean now level 4 times now. In the earlier days at smaller state college, colleges. But people would ask me, well, coming up from IT, how do you think you can do the full domain? The lucky part, remember I said I count lucky.
Yes.
The lucky part was, as an IT systems librarian at that time, you got to go into almost every area of the libraries, work closely with the people there to change workflows and integrate new systems and services. It was policies. It was more than just about the IT. It was about everything. And so that really helped me learn the full domain of the library. So that was my trajectory. By the way, I used to be involved in DEI work when it wasn't popular, like back in the 1990s.
How about that, right? I don't think that a lot of people understand that the traction that it has gained now was not the case in the early part of your and my career at all. It was a big tussle. Yes.
It was. Well, and at Wayne State, there was a time when every single person in administration there, and I love my alma mater, don't get me wrong, but just factually, everybody happened to be white. And I was trying to work with the few unicorns of us who were BIPOC librarians. I was trying to tell people, work with them to mentor, to say, you really should be in leadership. You should be trying. And then one time someone looked at me and said, well, what about you? And I said, no, no, no,
Hmm.
I like being middle management. But the words struck me and I thought, I think I do have to step up to the plate. So it was
Hmm.
more about that, we needed to be at the table and there were only so few of us around. So
Right.
that's what happened.
Right. Wow. And I do want to expand more on your career path in relationship to the deanship, because it's such an important piece around, particularly for those who aspire to leadership, to hear from someone who has done it in multiple places and in multiple ways. But I'll share with you a quick anecdote is that in a recent conversation, Adriene, I asked a person in the library, do you know, just like, how are you doing? And the person said to me, Alexia, deaning is hard. And I don't think that people really understand how hard it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard this kind of concept of, as I'm sure you have, living in the role multiple times, this notion of deaning, which is a way I think to describe both the overt and the invisible labor that goes into being a top administrator over a major unit. But I don't think that people really have a sense of the skills or the attributes that are required to be a successful library dean. So, what are some of the skills and attributes that have made you successful as a 4-time library dean, and why?
Thank you for that question. I mean, if I could say first, just to frame this before I answer that question.
Sure.
Well, one thing, after having done this a few times now, one at different levels, each of the times it was to maybe a bigger, more complex place. So it was
Mm-hmm.
it was a challenge, But all
Right.
of the places I've been have been arguably very under-resourced.
That's so surprising to hear. I can't imagine that. That's so surprising.
Well, and then many people, it's been said, and if any of your listeners are from Harvard, so forgive me, Harvard people, but it's been said out there that even Harvard feels poor.
Oh my gosh.
But mainly because we all stretch to whatever that capacity is, and then you feel overstretched. But I'm talking poor usually, where you hardly have enough to do your core functions, yet you still have to be innovative.
Right.
But what I wanted to say about that was, I hope that all of us, when we do talk about leadership, understand that every context can be so different. And then in libraries, especially, some of the contexts are not very visible. They're hidden.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
example, one place I went in 5 years, 3 presidents, 4 provosts, budget cuts. Another place, no endowment. Yet another place, the library had 5 million in spending endowments every year. So a lot of these things are not well advertised, but that does hurt my heart a bit when you have so many challenges that someone else may not have, and
Right.
yet people compare, whereas the comparisons are apples and oranges at times. So that's my overarching frame. The skills one needs. Well, of course, caring about people and actually being able to work well interpersonally is so important. And if, I tend to be pretty introverted, but I've had to overcome a lot of that. So I guess I would say that if you are introverted, being able to push yourself to be a bit more extroverted while still honoring yourself.
Yes. Yes.
We introverts, we need to go re-energize ourselves after things. But in this type of role, you really have to be around people quite a bit. You have to do public speaking quite a bit. For example, just recently had to go to a cocktail party. I'm not the cocktail party type,
I
but
hear you.
but you have to meet donors or supporters,
Right.
other board
Yes.
members. So I think that's important. Being strategic, yet then being able to gain the respect of your team by at least knowing the domain enough that you can help to, if they need it, help to guide, help to shape the program or the, whatever you're working on. I think that is important.
Yes.
And then knowing how to, if possible, manage up and, be able to, once you're at a different table that's outside the library, I think that could be a shock to some people who've never held this role, that you're now suddenly, the library is, yes, your organization that you're representing, but you're part of a team now.
Yeah,
You're
right.
not, you're not able to bring up the library all the time, or else it may be seen as self-serving or counterproductive. So that part is a shock when you first sit at that other table. And so having to be very adaptive, and in resource constrained organizations, very resilient and resourceful. Those are things that I would say are the top. Finally, willing to, I hate to say it because we talk about work-life balance a lot, but being willing to work a lot. It is 99% sweat, I would have to say.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to expand just a little bit on this idea of the dean of the library sitting at these other tables, right? And so for our listeners and viewers, can you describe what those other tables are? So is this president's cabinet, provost cabinet, a combination of the two? Like, just give folks a sense of all these different spaces through which a library dean has to successfully navigate and negotiate.
Oh, yes. Well, it's so interesting because I think if some may not think about it that much, to really understand, depending on the structure of the organization, your table that you're sitting at might not be the right one you need to sit at. Or maybe it's not enough of the tables, The reason I say that is there have been at times in the library world when people toy with, should the library be put underneath IT? That was, and reporting to a CIO.
Right.
I think I could see some advantages to that if I were really being honest. Like there could be some advantages, but on the other hand, I would not be sitting with academic leaders that often, with other deans who are running the academic programs and curriculum. I wouldn't be at their table that much. Student success, I might not be. So I'm just saying it depends on your context. I personally, so in my role, I sit with the deans of the university, and at those meetings, the academic priorities, programs, aspirations, strategic planning, all of that I get to partake in. So that's one thing. And then there are other groups on campus that one gets assigned to, committees that are at a campus-wide or institution-wide level on rankings and reputation, for example. What else? Student success types of committees. Some of them you might start as a library dean. So, for example, I started one here working to get the sponsorship of others, but on affordable course content and on open science. I started those by reaching out to VP of research, the provost, saying, would you sponsor these new groups? And then you go across all the departments and try to get key faculty champions to work with you. So those people, occasionally I do sit with the presidents and VPs. We have retreats and other meetings, but those are not, if I report to the provost. And so oftentimes we're not all together because she does want her own team to be able to develop that, but we do sit together at times. And at those meetings, I can bring up high level aspirational directions and projects to get the president's ear and the other vice presidents. So I hope that answers your question, but
No, it absolutely does. And thank you so much, because I do feel like that gives broader perspective. Because particularly for people who are interested in pursuing the path of leadership, you raise so many important points, and that it's all not internally focused or scoped. You know, that once you reach that top level within an academic library, you're going to be doing the work of the deanship or the director plus institution-wide work, and just being able to be a successful navigator within those different contexts and being able to flip different hats is really going to be important for one's success. So no, you absolutely answered the question. Thank you. One of the other things that people will ask me about, and I imagine they ask you about this as well, Adriene, is about professional development.
mhm.
And how does one grow their skills, right, in order to lead successfully, particularly in these very complicated times? And you have always, as long as I've known you, you've been very committed to professional development. You know, in the midst of having multiple jobs, you pursued and got a PhD. You know, so I've always admired that aspect of you. And I think, though, that many people in our profession feel that their time is so limited. Like, where do I carve out space for professional development, right? They can't see themselves, you know, really allotting the essential time to it. So how are you able to carve out time for your professional development?
Well, that is a tough dilemma. And I will always admit to, certain privileges and differences I have. And one of those is, I chose to be child-free
Yeah,
in my life.
yeah,
Sometimes I look at some of my colleagues, women who have families, and I wonder, how do you do it? How do you carve out
yeah,
time?
right.
But with that said, the jobs could consume all of us. I'm talking not even leaders, not just leaders, but all of us in libraries. I mean, the complexity of our jobs just keeps exponentially growing, and all along,
Yes,
because of our service ethic and what we do, the boundaries are kind of fuzzy these days. So we belong in a lot of arenas, and that means time is very constrained too.
mm-hmm,
But with that said, then one just really has to prioritize and focus and try to say no on occasion to some service opportunities, some other tasks where one can, to take care of one's self. In a way, if you think about it as a self-care moment, in
mm-hmm,
this case, self-care professionally, that unless we
mm-hmm,
refresh ourselves and really do some deeper work, let's say you want to write an essay, or you want to uh, read a book that really helps you, or take a course online, I think we have to carve that time out. And if something otherwise has to wait or be put on hold, it just has to be done. Time is
right,
finite, so we can't do it all.
right, right.
I've just been lucky that I I didn't have kids to have to work, to take care of. So that was one way I did it.
Right. No, that's really very helpful too, because the other piece of it, frankly, is you know, we often, I think, talk about this notion of, well, you got to take these courses, or you should do this particular type of work, or you should do these particular type of activities. But the reality for many is that, you know, they're trying to balance that with so many other duties and responsibilities. And I think that that's the self-reflective conversation that people need to have about their desire to go into leadership before wanting to pursue leadership, because it is time consuming without a question. You're not going to get all of the skills or the knowledge that you need through observation or through graduate school, in librarianship, or in the information, sciences, or information studies, or communications. Like, you're going to have to just really identify what are those key opportunity areas for yourself, and then literally build a plan for it.
That's true. And well, that word plan that you said, Alexia, I think that's important because I tended in the earlier days too to just kind of almost be ad hoc as things presented themselves or opportunities, go here, go there. But I do think more of us, maybe including myself, could do well with really planning out the next few years, plans that are flexible,
Right. That's right. That's right. Yes.
But think ahead, that far ahead maybe, and even ask yourself, what is it that I truly want? And then scaffold onto that till you get there.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to pivot now, Adrienne, to talk about the research around the bamboo ceiling, which I just find to be so fascinating. In fact, I know that there are a couple of new books that have come out about navigating the bamboo ceiling for colleagues who are of Asian descent. And some of the research talks about, there's a set of factors, cultural, individual, and organizational, that can sometimes serve as a barrier for professional success. And I'll just very quickly share an example, which is a heart-rending example when we kind of weave together the challenges of the bamboo ceiling and then also professional development. But I frequently have had to coach colleagues of Asian descent that you don't have to professionally develop around your culture or professionally develop around your accent, right? Mm-hmm. Yet this is something that remains a persistent challenge, right? And then, for those who are thinking about moving into managerial roles, there's still a lot of concern around, strategies and activities, right? So what can I do from a tactical perspective? And then what long-term strategies can I employ as a person of Asian descent in order to move, towards professional success? So can you talk about some of your strategies and some of your activities that you've employed to circumvent the bamboo ceiling?
Well, I still feel like I'm doing that too every day.
I hear you, right? I hear you.
I think that it does still happen no matter what level one is at or where one sits in the organization, it happens. And I wish I could give some silver bullet-y type of responses, but to be honest, some of it has been compromise, where some of it, I admit, adaptive, where I think all of us who, especially those of us who are BIPOC women, or those who live in the intersections, we have to do a lot of code switching at times and adaptation.
Yes.
And for example, one thing that I was noticing a lot in my earlier career, when those colleagues who have they were usually white men who did it. I'm not saying all, but you would contribute something and then they would repeat what you said.
Like it was theirs.
Like it was theirs. And then the whole table would say, oh, yes, yes, I agree with Robert.
It's a great idea.
But I would, and of course, many of us have experienced that. But I sat back, and because I do one of the things, I did think I have many weaknesses, but whenever I take all those strength finder tests and those things, strategic always comes up like way off the spectrum. But I'd sit back and I'd think too about their body language. I'd be watching them, their body language, why they did that, how they did that. And it started making me realize that some people speak up at the table just to have their voices heard. It didn't even matter the substance of what they were saying.
So true. And we're always so worried about, I literally made a joke in a meeting yesterday. I said, I don't always talk because I want to make sure I share something of value, but it's so real, It's so true.
Alexia, see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that I started watching that and thinking, like I said, introvert, and I was like you, Alexia, where I shared when I had something significant to say, and I thought that would be a great thing.
Right.
And it is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but I realized, no, I'm going to start adapting and doing that and seeing if it makes a difference. And I think it did start to make a difference. Now, another thing I would do, if somebody did try to take my idea and say it, repeat it, I would take my next opportunity at that same meeting to say, oh, and by the way, as I was saying earlier, before Robert, did repeat it, but I know that,
Right.
but you do
It's
have
so
to
true.
try to reclaim it. And another lesson, if I saw it happening to other women or people of color, you can be the voice to amplify their voice, to say, as Alexia said, da 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 da, I agree with
right.
Now we do it in Zoom with +1s, and I love that. But
right.
But that's just like a metaphor of what else you can do. I have found that it is good to reach out and find a sponsor. Ask them to be your sponsor. Find a good mentor. So as I said, start watching those who maybe you admire their successes and adapt to maybe try out some of their techniques. And then the other, again, we do have to pay a tax in, I hate to say it, but sometimes more work. Now, I hope that changes, and I hope it is changing now, but you did ask me what it was for me.
Yes.
And for me, it was about, for example, I said, I am going to get the top credentials because that will never be an excuse.
Amen. Yep.
And so I would go like this on my arm. I'd say, you want me to have credentials? Well, I will have so many. But it was more about proving it to myself that nothing that I would do everything in my life to try to be at, where the decisions were being made. And it happened to work by luck sometimes. That I got the opportunities, and it did help. But if I didn't have those credentials and that hard work behind me, I don't think I would have gotten the opportunities, to be honest. And that's where we do pay a tax in time and effort that others of the dominant culture, usually white people, but they don't have to pay those taxes.
Right. That is such a really powerful and important point, because when we look at the data in relation to women of color, they are the ones that are doing the multiple certificates. Like someone was just saying to me, like, aren't you still in your PhD program? Yes. Didn't you do a certificate? And yes. Didn't you just finish your certificate? Yes. Because like you, the credentialing matters for us. It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
Could I add, though, Alexia, that with times changing, though, for anyone listening or watching, on the other side of that truth is another one, though. And that is that, you and I have probably been on hundreds of search committees and etc.
Yes.
And what I've noticed is that some people of the dominant culture, they will apply to something when they barely have their minimums.
Right.
And they'll just take their chances. Whereas we can go too far to the other side of the spectrum and think we have to have every T crossed, every dotted I. And oftentimes, just give it a chance. You may you may be holding yourself back because you don't have one of the bullets. And yet you could be the perfect, shining gem that they want, that people need.
Right. Absolutely. No, thank you so much for that. And one of the things that I've always admired, I admire many things about you, but one of the things that I admire about you tremendously is that you lead with all of your identities. Like even throughout this entire conversation, you've weaved in all of the different, life pieces that have created, the beautiful aspects of who you are as a leader. And, it's funny because there now seems to be, and I think this is because of Gen Z, Adriene, this real rising interest in authentic leadership, and so now we actually have, an emergent theory, right? That is still being tested out, but there's some truth to it, no pun intended, around this idea of authentic leadership in theory and in practice. And, part of that is leading with confidence, right? And being able to have kind of strength and principles to lead with confidence. So, how did you develop the confidence to lean into all of your identities? And what advice would you have to others in terms of confidence building for themselves?
Mhm. I love these questions.
Thank you.
They're causing me to be very reflective these days. But so I guess in answering that one, I would say, if I could give an example, as I said earlier, I've been on a search chair I literally hundreds of times. Also a chair for deans of whole colleges, CIOs, so
Mhm.
outside of the library. And one thing, this is anecdotal, truly anecdotal, but one thing I noticed that sometimes candidates of color, women, would be very professional, talk a lot about the job itself, about their skills and attributes, but they wouldn't share a lot of their personal backgrounds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I started to recognize that in myself, but this was many years ago now, but because I had such a different background, again, raised in poverty, I came from
Mhm.
a childhood of a lot of abuse. So I ran away from home when I was 16. I earned
Mm.
GED. I was high school dropout. These were
Mhm.
things that I was relatively ashamed of in the beginning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what that would translate to, though, is when other people would be talking about their family vacations or I would just be quiet because I didn't want to bring the room down. It's not that you wanted to do that or have pity, but it was your only story that you could tell. That was
Right.
that was you.
Right. Right.
I realized people were perceiving it as being very reserved and private
Mhm.
and not real friendly because you weren't sharing. But it was that other stuff going on in my head. And then I remembered now bringing it back to those search committees and those experiences. By the time that you are a candidate like that in a search,
Mhm.
people are pretty much confident that you're going to be able to do the job. What they want to know is, what are you, Alexia, let's say, bringing uniquely different that is going to make you a better candidate than the 5 other people they're looking at.
Right.
And
Right.
when I saw that, like a pattern that was happening, again, anecdotally, but I thought there were more risks for us as BIPOC people as
Yes.
people to share on that level. And because we were probably culturally competent, adaptive, we didn't maybe feel confident to share some of our personal background. Could that be too much? Could it just show our difference too much? But I started thinking, this is hurting the candidate somewhat.
Mm. Mhm.
Because the other candidates who happen to be white, let's say, but they were doing it, and then other people related to them more and thought they were more warm, or there were all these reasons. But then that all made me reflect back to my own self and think, I need to start talking more about what brought me to this place,
Mhm.
my background and my experiences, and how that is different from others people. Not saying it's better, but just different. And it really could inform higher education, for example, and libraries.
Yes.
We often talk about transfer students and first generation and minoritized peoples, and here we go. Many of us have that. So if we hold it back and not bring it to our leadership, for example, who is that serving? If we fought so hard to be there and yet we're not sharing ourselves, I'm not sure that's fulfilling for anybody. So
Right.
that's what I started thinking.
Right. But it's the confidence piece, that I think is vital because, you and I, Adrienne, came into the workplace at a particular time where some of the nuances of DEI, like, so a culturally competent workplace, like no one was thinking about that. I surprised some team members recently when I said, I was very much discouraged in wearing natural hair in the early part of my career. It was not considered professional, right? So there was real consequence to people of color attempting to assert authenticity, right? In particular spaces and particularly in the workplace. And, I guess what I'm trying to, ascertain is the degree to which, what do you give yourself a pep talk in the morning? Like I think about the comedian Cat Williams, where he talks about, he has this great skit on your star play, on being your own star player, and how you have to talk to yourself in the morning, every morning in the bathroom mirror, as if you are the franchise player of your own team, right? And I do that. I actually give myself pep talks in the morning, before I start the work, wherever I am. And so I'm really interested to hear you, like, how did you grow that confidence? Because as a person, people are often surprised. I'll use myself briefly as an example. People are often surprised to learn that I'm a first generation college graduate. And it was something that I did not share. I was embarrassed about it because I was working in these corporate spaces where the overwhelming majority of individuals were not only educated, college educated, they had multiple graduate degrees, and they all seemed to have gone to the same elite institutions. And at the time, my institution wasn't necessarily considered, at that same elite level, right? And so, so there was always kind of this sense of me feeling like an imposter, me like, so I felt like I had to work extra hard to be able to garner the strength of kind of my constitution to sit in a space to be comfortable enough to work alongside of people who had degrees from Ivy League institutions, whose parents and grandparents had also had degrees from these similar places. And they came into those spaces with a degree of knowing that I didn't have, just kind of the hidden nuances, right? So what are the Adrienne strategies around confidence? Like, do you say, Adrienne, you're the baddest thing since sliced bread? Do you read something? Is there a particular podcast?
Well, I don't know if there are those things, but maybe it is maybe, how we have myths for reasons. There are myths that can help to feed our soul, etc.
Yes.
But maybe a myth I tell myself, and maybe not in that ritualistic way, but I have, as I mentioned a little briefly earlier, that I have been an activist. And I think I've always had this will, there's a will to power. And I don't think mine is power, but what my will is will to serve the underdog, or a will to justice or something. Because of what I went through as a younger person.
Yes.
And then I had this quote. It's right in front of me because I have it on my email signature right now. But the quote is, sometimes we are blessed with being able to choose the time and the arena and the manner of our revolution, but more usually we must do battle where we are standing. And that's from Audre Lorde, who is one of my favorite poets. But the reason I have it on my email signature is because maybe that's my myth and story, because I'm on a road to continue to build coalitions, influence people and our profession, if I can, influence our organization to bring more justice and knowledge into the world. And I know that sounds very lofty and all that, but that is what keeps me going. It really, truly is. If I didn't have that belief that we often fall down. We don't meet those aspirational. And I'm talking even the USA, but right. I have to believe we could strive toward some of those goals and aspirations while never getting there totally. I don't believe in utopia, But that is why I'm doing this work, and it extends beyond libraries, but it gives me the strength to maybe even, if you don't make it, fake it till you make it type thing. Some days
Yeah,
I don't feel that confident. But
that's right.
I am in it as almost a warrior type of way, spirit, where I'm going to muster that strength because it is something worthwhile to achieve. So that's what I tell myself. It may not work for everybody, but that's mine.
Adriene, thank you so much for such a delightful interview. We
Thank
really appreciate your time. And we know that our viewers and listeners are going to enjoy all the pieces of wisdom that you've imparted on us as a part of this podcast. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.